BARK Radio.
The SEC is often considered the best conference in college football and consistently produces elite football teams and elite talent in the NFL, but hasn't had a team making the national championship since 2023. Looking at this year's crop of teams and comparing it to the rest of the country, though, it looks like this will be the year that changes that and the SEC returns to the pinnacle of the sport. Despite so much turnover with the transfer portal, some of these teams look incredibly good on both paper and tape, and I can't wait to watch this season unfold. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive right into my power rankings, starting at the top, where we'll head down south to Austin, Texas with the Longhorns. Texas takes the top spot in the SEC for me, and actually the top spot in the entire country as my number one overall team. I really do believe in Arch Manning's ability to lead this team, but it obviously helps when you have a roster this talented. 7 players made my top 100 list, and I was pretty close to including 2 or 3 others. Starting with the offense around Arch, they've got my top duo in the SEC with Trey Wisner and CJ Baxter, with Baxter coming back off an ACL injury that sidelined him for all of last season. And then a loaded receiver room with Ryan Wingo, DeAndre Moore, and Emmett Mosley out wide, and Cal transfer Jack Endries at tight end, who should again be one of the top weapons in the country. And to top it off, while I do think there are better lines in the SEC, the Texas O-line should be very solid. Andre Kojo will miss the entire year, but they've got Trevor Gooseby and DJ Campbell, who are both all SEC caliber players to hold it down. Now over to the defense, which I graded as the second best in the entire conference. Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill Jr. lead the way as 2 of the best players in the nation. And Texas returns both Malik Muhammad and Michael Taft in the secondary. I've always been a big fan of Trey Moore on the edge, but having Ethan Burke and even Colton Vasek make that unit absolutely lethal with depth. Arkansas transfer Brad Spence is someone I really believe can be an impactful addition to the linebacker unit as well. Just an all-around really strong defense that can continue to improve week to week as some new starters step up and fill the voids left by losing Jahdae Barron, Andrew Makuba, and Alfred Collins. Looking over the schedule, Texas gets an instant test traveling to Columbus to take on Ohio State week 1, and will have to head to Florida and Georgia this season, but avoid both Alabama and LSU. There are definitely some tough matchups, but if this Texas team is as good as I believe they are, I can see anywhere from 10 to 12 wins being super realistic. I just don't see many teams being able to slow down this offense, let alone score with consistency against the Longhorns in 2025. I really like Alabama's chances in the SEC this season, but if a lot of it rides on the performance of Ty Simpson. He's had very limited playing time across his first 3 seasons at Alabama, but now steps into year 4 with a really good offense around him. Unfortunately, it was recently announced that starting running back Jam Miller will be out with an upper body injury with no timetable for return yet, so Richard Young and Daniel Hill are next up with very limited experience last season between the two. On the bright side though, the offensive line looks phenomenal this year with 3 of my top 10 linemen in the SEC between Proctor, Brailsford, and Roberts. And of course, a loaded receiving room led by sophomore Ryan Williams, and then Jeremy Bernard and Isaiah Horton as the other options. I really expect this to be one of the better offenses in the country still, but what I'm most excited for with this team is easily the defense. I personally think it's a top 5 unit in the nation, with a star-studded secondary led by both Bray Hubbard and Keon Sabb, as well as Damani Jackson and Utah transfer Cam Calhoun. Star linebacker Deontay Lawson returns again, and I think Justin Jefferson is an absolute monster as well. On the D-line, I'm really expecting a breakout year from LT Overton, becoming one of the premier edge rushers in the conference, and Tim Keenan and James Smith make up a dominant interior duo. I really think this defense is talented enough to slow down the best offenses in the country and keep them in any game. And looking at the schedule, there's several tough games on the slate, but I really only point to Georgia and Athens as the game they likely aren't favored to win. At South Carolina and of course the Iron Bowl on the road would be tough environments, but getting both LSU and Oklahoma at home is huge, as I think both are loaded with talent that can rival the Tide this season. With all that said, my prediction for Alabama this year is an 11-1 regular season finish, and both an SEC title and college football playoff appearance. Georgia has obvious national title potential given the recent success of the program and the elite talent depth on the roster, but again, a looming question surrounding the offense and its ability to be great against the best. There's a lot new this year for Kirby Smart, and it starts with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback and a fairly inexperienced offensive line stepping up. Stockton's got a little experience in some big games coming in the SEC title game and then the playoff game he started, but with the SEC looking as loaded as it does, they're really going to need a strong year from him. It does help the situation though when you have the offensive weapons Georgia has with Nate Frazier and Josh McCray making up one of my favorite duos in the SEC this season. McCray brings starting experience over from Illinois, and Frazier has a legit RB1 potential in the conference in my mind. Out wide, they bring in Zachariah Branch from USC, who's an absolute lightning bolt with the ball, but has underwhelmed a bit compared to the lofty expectations set for him during his time at USC. But he could easily break out alongside Dylan Bell, Colby Young, and Noah Thomas. And of course, it helps when you have the best tight end room in America with Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky. And heading over to the defense, KJ Bolden, Kristen Miller, and CJ Allen are 3 superstars returning to lead the squad, with Bolden having some incredible potential as being one of the best safeties in America this season. Dalen Everett returns as well, and I expect him to make another jump to be one of the best corners in the SEC. And I've got my eyes on all of Raylan Wilson, Jordan Hall, Chris Cole, Xavier McLeod, and Ellis Robinson as potential breakout candidates to step up and take this defense to the next level. And they'll need it looking at their schedule, taking on all of Alabama, Texas, Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Georgia Tech this season. And my expectation with that group of games would at least be a 9-win season though. But I'm going to go with 10-2 as an official prediction from me for the Bulldogs in 2025. I think Florida is the 3rd best team in the SEC from a talent perspective, but I won't lie, I'm worried for them this season considering their schedule and some injury problems with DJ Lagway. Last year they faced a gauntlet and managed 8 wins out of it, and again this season they'll take on 7 preseason ranked teams. It sounds like Lagway should be good to go, but is already banged up right now, so that could be a problem down the line considering his injury history last season. I really believe he's a top 10, maybe top 5 quarterback in the country, but if he can't stay healthy, it can easily derail Florida's season. If healthy though, I really like the talent around him. Jaden Ball can be an elite RB1 this season, and I think Jacoby Jackson will again be one of the best split backs. And Trey Wilson, J. Michael Sturdivant, Aiden Mazzell, and true freshman Dallas Wilson make up one of my favorite receiving rooms in the conference. The offensive line should be a strong point with Jake Slaughter, Austin Barber, Nijah Harris, and my breakout candidate Bryce Lovett. And of course it helps when you go up against one of the best defensive lines in the country in practice every day. Caleb Banks, Tyreek Sapp, George Gums, and Jamari Lyons make up that unit, which gives a big boost to that defense overall. Sophomore Miles Graham might be the most obvious breakout contender on the roster at linebacker. And in the secondary, I'm expecting Dejan Johnson and Cormani McLean to step up in a big way. And obviously I trust Moore, Denson, and Castile as playmakers back there already. Again, I think the overall talent of this Gators team is top 10 in the country. It just comes down to staying healthy and going game by game through another tough schedule. Their record could be anywhere from 7-5 to 11-1 to me because of that, but I think a 9-win season gets some heavy college football playoff consideration, and that will be my best guess as of right now for them. I have LSU at 5, but I could definitely see them outplaying this ranking considering the talent and potential on the roster. Garrett Nussmeier had his struggles last year with turnovers at times, but we saw the arm on display, and I think his growth this year should be huge. And it helps having maybe the deepest set of weapons in the entire country. Both Aaron Anderson and Nick Anderson are arguably top 10 receivers in college football, and then Barry and Brown can easily be considered for the best wide receiver 3 in the country. And they still have Chris Hilton and a tight end room 3 deep with Trey Des Green, Bauer Sharp, and Donovan Green. Just absurd depth throughout the core for Nussmeier to target this season. The balance really comes down to the newcomers on the offensive line stepping up to help Caden Durham, Caleb Jackson, and freshman Harlem Berry in that running game. Losing 4 starters to the NFL is a huge blow, but Braylon Moore and Josh Thompson come in through the portal to take on the challenge, and I actually like the potential of the line this season. Now taking a look at the defense, this is a very promising unit to me. Whit Weeks is one of the best linebackers in the country, and we all know the sky-high potential of both Harold Perkins and Patrick Payton. Jack Pyburn may end up starting over Payton this year at edge, it sounds, but I have high hopes for Perkins again at linebacker. Mansour Delaney should be a solid addition to the corner room with Ashton Stamps and true freshman freak DJ Pickett, who will absolutely see time early. But I think my favorite addition of the entire offseason was Houston safety transfer AJ Halsey. I was pretty high on him last year, and he impressed even further. Schedule-wise, LSU has it rough, though, heading to Clemson Week 1 and playing 6 of my top 8 teams in the SEC, not including themselves. I'm not sure I see them surviving that gauntlet beyond 8 wins, honestly, but a 9-win season could definitely give them a shot at a playoff spot. I'm really high on Oklahoma's roster this season, but they've got a schedule that could really make it tough for the record to match the talent level. Week 2 at home against Michigan will tell us a lot about this Oklahoma team, although it may not be Michigan at its best because of a young Bryce Underwood. It'll give us a good idea as to if Oklahoma can survive a stretch against Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Alabama, Missouri, and LSU to end the year, though. I do favor Oklahoma right now in that matchup against Michigan because I think John Mateer is a difference maker. I'm not in love with his weapons as I am with some other squads, but Deion Burks is a really tough cover. Isaiah Sategna comes over from Arkansas, and I see breakout years coming from Zion Kearney and Arkansas Pine Bluff transfer Giovanni Gibson, which make the room pretty strong. Jaden Ott struggled with some injuries last year at Cal, but is one of the better running backs in the country, and all of Javonte Barnes, Xavier Robinson, and Taylor Tatum have the talent to be really great handcuffs. The O-line isn't outstanding, but doesn't look like an issue either as well, so I'll be watching the development there. Defensively, though, Oklahoma looks great, majorly in part to the D-line. R. Mason Thomas, Grayson Halton, Demonic Williams, and Marvin Jones Jr. make up one of my favorite D-line units in all of college football, and Kip Lewis is a stud at linebacker. Taking a look at the secondary, Eli Bowen is an obvious star at corner, and I think Gentry Williams is a great partner for him. Kendall Daniels' versatility as a linebacker and safety make him a weapon for Vanderbilt's defense too, so I'm really excited to see how he performs this season. All of these guys forming a rock-solid defense can give Oklahoma a leg up, but similar to what I said about Florida or LSU, I'm just not sure the schedule is really survivable right now to predict a playoff appearance being in the cards for the Sooners. Texas A&M is firmly in sleeper territory for me in both the SEC and College Football Playoff picture this season. A lot of it bearing on the shoulders of Marcel Reed continuing to progress as a passer to complement his mobility. If we see that growth this season, I think the Aggies have more than enough talent to compete with the best in the SEC. The running back room is incredible, with Moss as one of my top backs, and then Daniels and Owens are very talented guys behind him. Incoming transfer Casey Conception is an absolute weapon for the offense, one of the best receivers in the country, joining Terry Bussey, Mario Craver, and Bethel Roman. I have pretty high hopes for Texas transfer Amari Niblack being a safety net for Reed as well at that tight end spot. And the A&M O-line grade is one of my top units for 2025, led by Armaj Reed Adams and Trey Zune. On defense, the Aggies look even brighter, with Cassius Howell and Torian York cracking my top 100 and Will Lee coming very close at corner. I think Iowa State transfer Tyler Onyedem will have a huge impact on the interior, replacing Shamar Turner. Both Des Ricks and Jordan Shaw are impact corners, and I point to Dan Hayes, TJ Searcy, and freshman Marco Jones as breakout players at edge to complement Howell. But regardless of who breaks out, I see this A&M D as a top 5 group in the SEC, which would be huge considering some of the teams they'll face this season. They'll head to Notre Dame, LSU, and Texas this season, and get Florida, Auburn, and South Carolina at home, all of which will be huge matchups to give them a chance at a playoff spot, obviously. Again, if Reed breaks out, this could be the year for A&M to take that jump, but my honest prediction would have to be 8-4 this season, potentially 9-3 if they're able to sweep the home slate and avoid any upsets along the way. South Carolina has a really high ceiling with some of the talent they have rostered this season, but enough question marks for me to put them down at 8th in my power rankings. Nonetheless, schedule-wise, I think they're set up for a potential playoff appearance if they're able to knock off a couple Giants at home in Oklahoma, Alabama, and Clemson. Lenora Sellers is poised for a massive year 2 as a leader of the offense, and is seen by many as the best quarterback prospect in the 2026 NFL Draft based on his potential. Nick Harbor's in a similar boat as a clear-cut freak athlete who hasn't done a ton on the field yet, but hopes are high that this is the year for him to explode. Along with him, I think Jared Brown and Mazeo Bennett are solid receiving options, but Michael Smith is my pick for breakout player of this offense at tight end. I really like his skill set and see him as Sellers' safety net this year. As for the running game, Razul Faison comes in as an 1,100-yard rusher in the Mountain West last season for Utah State, but there is little to no Power 5 production in the room, so Faison will need to prove his worth. The offensive line was an issue last year, but overall looks like it could be a bit better group based on returning experience and some transfer depth. I think the bigger issue I have with the Gamecocks this season is surprisingly the defense. South Carolina's been very good lately defensively and has a superstar edge in Dylan Stewart, another top 100 player to me in Jelon Kilgore at corner, and a great transfer corner in Brandon Siss. But outside of that, they've got a lot of production to replace. Over half of last year's defense is gone, and I'm not sold they have the same amount of talent this season. With that said, I am excited for a few guys to take on the challenge, those being Charlotte transfer Demon Clowney, sophomore linebacker Fred Johnson, D-tackle Troy Pikes, and senior edge Brian Thomas Jr. If they can stand out and replicate the level of play we saw from last year's NFL guys, the Gamecocks could be cooking into late November. I'm pretty high on Austin Simmons. I thought he was very impressive when he had to step in for Dart last season, and I think his crop of targets is a very good group. Caden Lee and Devon Stribling are both top 15 receivers in the conference for me, and both Trey Wallace and Traylon Ray bring great Power 5 experience over behind them. Both Caleb Oden and freshman Winnie Watkins could be breakout guys in that room as well, and the tight end duo of Luke Haas and Daquan Wright looks absolutely lethal. I am worried for the offensive line, honestly, but looking at the early schedule, I think they could have some time to figure things out and grow some camaraderie. There's a lot to replace defensively as well for the Rebels, considering they're second to last in the conference in returning production, and that does worry me, but I like some of the portal additions they brought in, as well as returning starters Suntarini Perkins and Xavier Harris. Perkins has legitimate first-team All-SEC potential this season, and I think both Deshaun Womack and Prince Will Umanmielen can bring an impact big enough to keep the pressure coming this season. Jalen Braxton is one of my favorite corner pickups in the entire conference, but I'm not the biggest fan of the other additions back there at least yet. Overall, I would grade the unit pretty middle of the pack in the SEC, and the same goes for the offense unless Simmons and the offensive line become a big strong point. But schedule-wise, it really is not too difficult compared to others. They avoid Texas and Alabama and get LSU, Florida, and South Carolina all at home. That could prove to be a deciding factor in the success of the Rebels this season, allowing time for growth on both sides of the ball and giving them a real shot later in the year. I am lower on Tennessee compared to the media consensus, and a lot of it just has to do with the youth throughout the roster and loss of production. They rank 111th nationally in returning offensive production and didn't bring too much to the portal to offset it. I am a fan of Duke transfer Star Thomas in the backfield though, paired with Bishop and Peyton Lewis, but I have some questions about Joey Aguilar's ability to command this offense. I was pretty high on him entering the year last year at App State, but it wasn't a good season by any means, and now Tennessee doesn't have the same level of talent around him as other teams within the SEC, so I definitely could see some issues with his performance. With that said, though, Chris Brazzell can absolutely break out into a premier wide receiver 1, and Miles Kittelman should be a huge weapon at tight end for him. The offensive line does look pretty strong with Lance Hurd back and incoming transfers Sam Pendleton and Wendell Moe. And I also think true freshman tackle David Sanders is an obvious freshman All-American candidate, but as a freshman we could see some struggles early, especially in the bigger games on the schedule. Defensively though, there's some big losses, but they return a majority of their production. Joshua Josephs is a beast, and I see Bryson Easton as a potential All-SEC candidate. We could see Arian Carter break out into a star linebacker for the Vols as well, and then Jermod McCoy, Ricky Gibson corner duo is a very strong one, with McCoy being one of my top corners in the entire country as long as he's healthy for this season. The big question is just if the offense can help its defense out and score enough this season to take down some of the Giants on the schedule. And if they can, they do have a chance to make some noise, playing my third easiest schedule in the SEC this season, and 48th nationally according to Phil Steele's strength of schedule rankings. I think Auburn's roster is pretty talented this season and could definitely see it making some noise, but I think a lot of it comes down to the quarterback situation, and considering everything we've heard from Coach Freeze, it doesn't seem like there's too much confidence in Jackson Arnold right now. He struggled quite a bit last year at Oklahoma at times and made the move over to Auburn, but clearly has not been impressing too much considering Freeze said there's a chance he plays 3 different guys week 1. Of course, there's a chance Arnold goes out there against Baylor and plays great, because with this core of weapons, it's honestly hard not to. Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton make up the best receiving duo in the entire country to me, and all of Malcolm Simmons, Horatio Fields, and Preston Howard will be impact weapons as well. The running back room is pretty talented with Robinson, Alston, and Cobb, and the offensive line should be a strong point with Xavier Chaplin coming in and all of Connor Lew, Jeremiah Wright, and Dylan Wade back. And looking at the defense, obviously Keldrick Falk is one of the best pass rushers in the country, but I think Rayon Strader is going to establish himself as an elite corner in the SEC from Miami, Ohio, and Kayan Lee is a stud as well. I am a bit worried about the front 7 besides Falk though. They'll need some guys to break out there, of course. Schedule-wise though, as I mentioned, it's not easy early. They travel to Baylor week 1, Oklahoma week 4, and Texas A&M week 5 before hosting Georgia. I genuinely believe Deuce Knight may be in a DJ Lagway situation from last year where he plays very early due to some struggles and impresses enough to make the switch, or play both, if not all 3 quarterbacks, including Daniels throughout the year. If they're staring at 3 or 4 losses halfway through the season, there's no reason not to look towards the future with Deuce, in my opinion. Missouri's an interesting team this season because talent-wise, I definitely think they're in the middle or bottom half of the SEC, but the schedule sets them up for a lot of success if they get breakouts at key positions, especially at quarterback with my best guess as starter, Bo Pribula transferring in from Penn State. Sam Horn will also see snaps week 1, but I do think Pribula ends up winning the job. Ahmad Hardy's my number 1 back in the SEC, coming in from Louisiana Monroe. The tape he put out as a true freshman was just absolutely ridiculous. I have zero doubts in his abilities transferring to this level of football. But the Missouri offensive line may not be strong enough to support the offense enough to be a consistent unit. Caden Green is an absolute mauler, but the unit as a whole I rank 10th in the SEC. And obviously we can expect some growing pains from Pribula considering the lack of playing time sitting behind Drew Aller. He did look good in his limited play though, and I think Kevin Coleman and Brett Norfleet will be some elite weapons for him to throw to, so the potential is there for the breakout. Defensively, I think the Tigers are about average within the conference, but a good unit nationally. Josiah Trotter coming for West Virginia is my top addition, along with Jalen Catalan and Damon Wilson. And then the returning group of Dalen Carnell, Toriano Pride, and Dre Norwood is a very good secondary core. Tristan Newton and Chris McClellan are established players as well, so you can see why Missouri ranks 10th in returning defensive production. All in all, I think it's a high potential season for Missouri considering they'll play a schedule that avoids all of Texas, Georgia, Florida, LSU, and Ole Miss. But there's still quite a few question marks surrounding the offense and overall talent level of the team besides the defense. But I like their chances of making a bowl game at the absolute minimum this season. Arkansas is in a pretty tough spot this season to me. I think it's still a fairly talented roster with some solid potential, but the offseason losses on top of a brutal schedule is super tough. They'll take on Notre Dame in the non-conference and travel to all of LSU, Texas, Tennessee, and Ole Miss this season and host Texas A&M, Auburn, and Missouri. The only way to survive a schedule that tough and reach a bowl game to me is if Taylon Green takes that next step as a passer and the receivers they brought in are all able to perform at the SEC level. Omega Blake, Cam Shanks, and Raylan Sharp all come from the group of 5, and then Jalen Brown and Jordan Anthony are exciting speed guys who could break out for the offense. I like sophomore Braylon Russell having a strong year too as a lead back now. And the offensive line isn't too bad either, with obviously Fernando Carmona being a monster and then Corey Robinson being an impactful transfer addition. So overall, the offense does have potential. It's just an unproven group because of Green's turnovers last season and the lack of continuity with the weapons. And on the other side of the ball, I'm actually a pretty big fan of the linebacker room, specifically Xavier Sori, who I can easily see playing his way into the All-SEC first or second team this season. Cameron Ball is another guy I think can dominate on the interior of the defensive line, but the edge room definitely needs some breakouts after losing Landon Jackson to the NFL. The secondary lost some talent as well, with previously injured Jalen Braxton out, and also the Metcalf brothers transferring out. But Eastern Michigan transfer Quintavious Scandrett is someone I really like on tape at safety, and I have sophomore corner Selman Bridges pegged as a breakout candidate there as well. Overall, I think it's just going to end up being a tougher season for Arkansas than they would hope for because of the schedule just being too difficult, but my eyes are still going to be on Taylor Green potentially blossoming at quarterback this season despite that. Vanderbilt has the most returning production in the entire SEC and the third most in the entire country overall this season, and got starting quarterback Diego Pavia cleared for one final season of college football, which was a huge win considering the season he had last year, leading Vanderbilt to one of their strongest seasons in some time and over 3,000 total yards. But expecting a similar result from the team this year might be wishful thinking taking a look at that schedule. They'll travel to Virginia Tech, South Carolina, Alabama, Texas, and Tennessee, and then host LSU, Auburn, and Missouri this season, all of which I have ranked ahead of them in talent rankings besides the Hokies in Week 3, who aren't too far behind them. But after last year, I won't put anything behind Pavia and say they won't find a way. Taking a look at the offense around him, they've got a superstar tight end and Eli Stowers back, as well as last year's leading wide receiver, Junior Sherrill. Both Cedric Alexander and AJ Newberry return in the backfield, so as I mentioned, the continuity is all there, although I wasn't a huge fan of last year's O-line, and besides Stowers, nobody really had crazy impressive seasons in 2024. Defensively, there's a lot to be desired on the defensive line still, but I do think Corday Snyder will have a Baker 2025. Sophomore Glenn Seabrooks is someone I see a ton of potential in as well, and I am much more confident in linebackers Langston Patterson and Brian Longwell, and the safety duo of Ranton Fontenette and FAU transfer CJ Hurd, who was incredible last season as a true freshman over there. Overall, I do not think Vanderbilt is a bad team by any means. I actually have them ranked in the top 40 nationally and right behind Arkansas. It's just a deep SEC overall, and the schedule is definitely a bit tougher, so it'll take some big wins early to really convince me that they're for real again. Kentucky is where the gap is at in the SEC for me. I have them much lower nationally than Vanderbilt, as I just don't see it from a talent perspective with the Wildcats this year. There are definitely some legit players scattered throughout the roster, but I have little to no confidence in Zach Calzada, and even less in his backup Cutter Boley. And I don't think it's far-fetched at all to say they're a much less talented team than the team who went 4-8 last year. That's not to say they'll do much worse than that, but the schedule definitely isn't an easy one. They'll take on 7 of my top 10 SEC teams and also head to Vanderbilt late in the year and then travel to Louisville to wrap up the season, who I ranked in my top 25. So with that schedule, I really don't see much success coming for the Wildcats this season, but I want to talk about some guys I would definitely be excited for if I was a Kentucky fan. For starters, Dante Dowdle is a stud at running back, as is his backups Jamarian Wilcox and Seth McGowan. That is definitely one of the better running back rooms in the conference overall, in my opinion. And I don't think the offensive line is going to be bad at all with Josh Braun, Alexander Wolschlager, and Shaziah Pete coming over in the portal. The receiver room has solid potential as well with Macklin, Law, Stellato, and Hester as my top 4. And then defensively, South Dakota transfer Marquise Grace could be a player, and David Gusta brings a lot of experience on the interior. But there definitely needs to be some breakouts all throughout the defense as a whole. DJ Waller is a clear-cut candidate for that, launching into a starting corner spot. Typically, Kentucky's defense is a strong point, but I'm just not sold that it'll be one this season at all right now. So looking at the talent plus the schedule, my best guess would be another 3 or 4 win season for the Cats. I've got Mississippi State last in the SEC, but a bit higher ranked than I had them a year ago. Losing a freshman stud in Michael Van Buren hurts a lot, but Blake Shapen is back healthy, and bringing in Fluff Bothwell after an absurd freshman season he had at South Alabama and pairing him with Devon Booth and Johnny Daniels makes this offense a potential weapon if things go right. The receiving core is a bit worrisome though. Not much Power 5 production in the room, but some intriguing names alongside Jordan Mosley, like Brennan Thompson, Jerron Glover, and Marcus Allen. Sidhu Traore is a solid player at tight end as well, but my bigger worry for the offense is the line. They actually graded out dead last in the conference at both offensive and defensive line for me entering the year, as I really only have faith in Albert Reese and Jacoby Jackson at guard, honestly. But a few transfer guys could prove to be impactful additions and change that throughout the season. And then over to the other side of the trenches, the defensive line was absolutely terrible last season for Mississippi State, but does look a little bit better heading into this year. Red Hibbler should be an impactful addition coming from NC State, and Coastal Carolina transfer Will Whitson could definitely be another. But a potential difference maker is Miami and Alabama transfer Jamil Burrows at nose tackle. anything will be an improvement from over a year ago, but I think he's got a lot of potential. Other than that, though, Isaac Smith is a star corner of the secondary, and I think Brylan Lanier can be a solid starter. And I really do think Old Dominion transfer Jerron Manning will be a big addition at safety as well. Overall, though, it's clear the talent level of this team isn't up to par as most SEC teams, and the schedule is incredibly tough. I really only see anywhere from 3 to 4 wins this season for the Bulldogs, but that would still be an improvement from last season. The SEC is another tough conference to rank the quarterbacks in. A ton of newcomers stepping into starting roles, and some returners who can clearly take a big step in their second year as starter at their programs. For example, I picked Nuss as my QB1 because of the arm talent, weapons around him, and the experience. And then Sellers second because of the rushing upside and clear potential to break out into a superstar this season. I am very high on DJ Lagway, as I've mentioned, but he really needs to stay healthy this season. Both Mateer and Manning have genuine Heisman Trophy upside at quarterback, but the conference is absolutely loaded, and Manning has not played much yet. And then all of Simpson, Simmons, Stockton, and Pribula strike me as guys who can easily outplay their preseason rankings, especially Simpson considering who he has around him. Over to the running backs, Ahmad Hardy is my clear RB1 in the conference entering the year. I expect a lot from him despite coming over from a smaller school. The talent is just absurd on tape to me. Jaden Ott should definitely get back to his 2023 Cal form after dealing with some injury issues last season. And then I think I have everyone between 3 and honestly 9 have the potential to be leading rushers in the conference, depending on their situation. With Jam Miller out for a while, both Alabama backs Richard Young and Daniel Hill will have huge chance to put some huge production, but the zero experience prevented me from putting them on this list. And then special shout out to Texas, Texas A&M, Georgia, and Kentucky for landing 3 running backs each on the list. Taking a look at the receivers, Ryan Williams is the clear number 1 for me, and I really think Cam Coleman is a freak right behind him. Auburn's room is one of the best in the country to me, with Singleton also at 3, and then Simmons and Fields cracking the list. LSU is arguably my best room with 3 guys in the top 17, and Chris Hilton's one of my favorite breakout candidates. And although they didn't make the list yet, I can easily see Dallas Wilson and Aiden Mizell making a big name for themselves this season at Florida. Some of my other big risers in the conference are Mikey Matthews at Tennessee, Jalen Brown at Arkansas, Zion Kearney at Oklahoma, Winnie Watkins at Ole Miss, and Parker Livingstone at Texas. The SEC is loaded at tight end per usual, with Eli Stores my top returner and Jack Entries at a clear number 2. I'm really high on Georgia and Ole Miss's tight end rooms as well, with each having 2 in the top 8, and LSU's depth is incredible with my number 10, 12, and 19. My big breakout guys this year are Michael Smith, Amari Niblack, Tony Livingston, Rohan Jones, Jordan Washington, and lastly Max Reese at Mississippi State, who is unlisted for now, but I definitely like his potential coming over from Eastern Michigan and playing behind Trey Orr. Here's my first team All-SEC. Picking a quarterback in this conference was super hard, but I really think Nussmeier leads the conference in passing yards with the weapons at his disposal. I went with Ahmad Hardy on the first team because I really believe in his ability to be a workhorse and help control the offense for the Tigers this season. And then over on the defense, this group is just absolutely loaded. I think Tim Keenan takes a huge leap this year as one of the best interior D linemen in the country. The same goes for KJ Bolden, who may already be a top 5 safety in the country. And then I gave respect to Jermod McCoy despite the fact that he could miss time early as he heals from a torn ACL that he suffered in January. Now on to my second team. Lenora Sellers makes it over Arch and Mateer because I really think he does take that leap. His rushing upside is absolutely massive. Nate Frazier should definitely be one of the leading rushers in the conference, and then Texas A&M lands a second and third offensive lineman on an all-SEC team with both Zune and Bizantes on here for me. Both Banks and Halton have first-team potential on the defensive line, but as I said, it's a loaded group in the conference. And then I am expecting a big bounce-back year from Harold Perkins to re-solidify himself as an elite linebacker. And then Trotter, Lee, and Halsey are some of my favorite, more underrated guys in the conference I expect big years out of in 2025. Lastly, to my third team, Arch Manning makes it over Mateer, Lagway, and others because I'm picking Texas to win the SEC and expect a massive year out of them. Le'Veon Moss could easily be higher, but I think A&M uses 3 backs this year pretty heavily, which could water his numbers down a bit. I definitely see Deion Burks breaking out into one of the better receivers in the country this season as Mateer's go-to guy. And then on the defense, it's a mix of my top defenders in the conference in Tyreek Sapp, Xavier Sori, and Keon Sabb, and then some breakout contenders like Raylan Wilson and Damani Jackson. There's obviously a ton of other guys I could have included, but this is what I went with for my third team. That is it for my SEC preview for 2025. Let me know your thoughts down below on any of these teams being underrated or overrated to you, or any ideas you have for football content you'd like to see in the future. As always, thanks for watching. Feel free to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
BARK Radio.